Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into a huge topic, sustainability. Now, it's a word that gets thrown around all the time, right? But how do these massive global companies actually turn that fuzzy idea into cold, hard numbers? We're going to look at the exact formulas and metrics they use to make sustainability something you can actually count.
So think about this for a second. How sustainable is your shopping cart? The answer is, well, it's way more complicated than you might think. Because it's not just about that final product on the shelf. No, it's about this long and usually invisible chain of farmers and processors and shippers that got it there. And for the world's biggest brands, that's a massive challenge.
You see, for a company that gets its products from farms, the really big risks aren't in their own shiny factories. They're hidden deep down in the supply chain, spread out across thousands and thousands of individual suppliers. So, poor working conditions or environmental damage happening halfway around the world can suddenly become a huge problem for them.
And believe me, those problems are very, very real. I mean, today's shoppers, you and me, we demand products that are sourced ethically. A single bad news story about one supplier can totally tank a company's reputation. Environmental problems can mess with the entire supply of crops. And on top of all that, governments are cracking down with some serious fines. This isn't just about PR anymore. It's about the bottom line.
So, to get a handle on all these complicated risks, companies have to find a way to make them visible. And the only way to do that, really, is to measure them. This is where specific accounting standards come in, turning these abstract ideas into actionable data.
It's a classic saying in business, and for good reason. You absolutely cannot manage what you don't measure. These standards give companies the tools they need, the formulas, the metrics, that let them track how they're doing, find the weak spots, and actually make things better across their entire supply chain.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty with our first key metric. This one answers a really basic question. How much of the stuff a company buys is actually confirmed to be sustainable by a credible outside group?
And this is what's called the percentage certified. A third-party certification is basically an independent stamp of approval. So think of groups like Fairtrade or the Rainforest Alliance. They have their own set of rules, and they send people out to check that a farm is actually following them. It's a way to prove you're doing what you say you're doing.
And the actual formula they use to figure this out is, honestly, beautifully simple. You just take how much money you spent on certified products, divide that by the total amount you spent on all products, and then multiply by 100 to get a percentage. It's a super clear way to see a company's commitment in dollars and cents.
Let's plug in some numbers to see how this plays out in the real world. So imagine a company spent a total of $30 million on its ingredients. And of that, $18 million went to suppliers who had that fair trade certification or something similar.
You run the numbers and boom, you get 60%. And that one single number tells a really powerful story to investors, to regulators, and to customers. It says, hey, 60% of our sourcing, by cost, meets a specific, verifiable sustainability bar. And here's the crucial part. A number like 60% isn't just for show. To an investor, it signals real, tangible benefits. It suggests the company might be able to charge more, that it can get into new markets that care about this stuff, and, most importantly, that it has a much lower risk of getting hit by some kind of supply chain scandal.
Okay, so buying certified products is one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole story. Companies also need to check up on their suppliers themselves, and the way they do that is through audits.
The easiest way to think about this is like a routine health checkup, but for the supply chain. Independent auditors literally go and visit suppliers to see if they're following the rules on everything from labor rights to how they handle waste. They're basically looking for problems.
And when they're doing these audits, there are two terms that are absolutely critical. When an auditor finds a problem, like a violation of the rules, that's called a non-conformance. And the plan to fix that problem? That's the corrective action. See, the goal isn't just to find problems, it's to make sure they actually get fixed. So let's look at the data from our checkup. In this example, they audited 50 suppliers, and the diagnosis came back showing a 20% non-conformance rate for major issues and a 24% rate for minor ones. That means almost half the suppliers had some kind of problem that needed fixing.
But here's where it gets really telling. This is the treatment phase. Check this out. An incredible 80% of the major, most serious problems got fixed. Now, the rate for minor issues is lower, but this shows the system is working. It's pushing suppliers to fix the biggest, most critical risks first.
So these numbers, the certification percentage, the audit scores, they're incredibly powerful. But they're most powerful when they aren't just stuck in a report somewhere, but are actually used to shape a company's business strategy.
And that brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, the narrative disclosure. This is where a company stops just showing you the numbers and starts telling the story of what it's doing with all that data to get smarter and to protect itself from future problems.
And this isn't just fluff. We're talking about real proactive steps, like using data to realize you're putting all your eggs in one basket with a risky palm oil supplier, so you start to diversify, or using audit results to create training programs for farmers on how to reduce pesticide use. It's about using today's data to manage tomorrow's risk.
And this, right here, is the real game changer. This whole process elevates sustainability from just being a marketing issue to being a core part of how a company manages risk, period. It puts social and environmental risks on the exact same level as financial and operational risks, because in today's world, they are all connected to the long-term health of the business.
For decades, what happened deep inside a supply chain was basically a black box. But with clear formulas, with audit procedures, with strategic disclosures, that's just not the case anymore. We can measure it. And that brings up a much bigger, much more important question for all the companies we buy from. What's the real cost of choosing not to know?